Okay, I turned on the recording. Hi, everybody. This is Tina Engberg, and we are super excited that you're here this evening to join us as we talk to Vaughn Lauer about test data and IEPs and how that data relates to how schools make decisions about your child's education. I was listening to a podcast earlier today, and that was one of the highlights of one of the comments that one of the participants was saying was that so much of the data you might not understand or have access to. And I think that one of the fundamental problems that we have in many of the schools here in Georgia is that the schools are not doing a particularly good job with either RTI or MTSS, whichever system they're using. And so any data that you're getting from the school district might not be enough to help guide the decisions that are being made. One of the unfortunate things I've been seeing over the past couple of years is that school psychologists are doing evaluation reports and might be leaving out subtest scores of the data that they present to parents. And that's particularly concerning because dyslexia is obvious within the subtest scores of the battery of tests. And if they're only providing you the composite scores, you may not see some of the deficits because of the way the numbers average. So Vaughn has over a 30-year career.
Yes.
I just did something this week that made me realize I've been out of school 32 years, so I could have a 30-year career as well. And so I will leave it to you, Mr. Lauer. Let's get started, and I'll let people in if we have stragglers.
And we are kind of relaxed, so I've set it up. If you've got a question, post it, and Tina will be monitoring that. We'll try to get as much in as we can. My presentation is shorter than the time we have allotted, which is great because I'll be able to answer questions. Up front, I will tell you that a lot of what I'm going to talk about is just what Tina pointed out, that folks don't know that there are other subtests that are or not assessed. And what I'm going to present and why I presented it, I guess I should start with, I wrote this book. I'm showing you only because it's a book on how to collaborate. It's 6 key questions to ask so you can lead a collaborative IEP meeting. And it's really good. It's so good that 2 parents reached out to me after they read the book, said, we like the book, but we want to tell you something else separately. We took your ideas and took it to our workplace and set up the system the same way you said to do, and we got the same results. It was absolutely amazing. And they thought, well, why not? It's problem solving. It can be applied anywhere. So I threw that in here too. But the first question in the book is, what do we know? And so often, everybody doesn't know the same thing, and no one knows everything. And then it was, okay, those evaluate. My wife's a special education teacher. And we were talking, I said, if parents could just see, if they could see those reports instead of having to read them and put your finger between the 1st and 3rd page and the 7th and the 9th and flip back and forth, we could start to see what the test scores look like and make more sense. But what we ended up with after alpha and beta testing is what I'm going to show you tonight. I can't say thousands and thousands of people are using it, but there are enough, and the feedback is just wonderful. And the idea was, because this is internet-based, you could take it to anywhere. You can open it anywhere. So you can show a friend, a colleague, you can take it to work, you can take it to the school meeting, use their internet service. and display it on the wall so the whole team can see it. And that's the magic of it. So enough rattling. Let me show you how you use it, how simple it is, and how useful it is. Now I got to find share screen. Please.
But you're
accept.
pulling that up. I wanted to point out to the people participating that the presentation of data is one of the key things that Pete Wright of Wright's Law talks about in his in-person class. And that's one of the ways in which he demonstrated to the Supreme Court that in his Shannon Carter case, that the school had not been fulfilling the promise of FAPE for her, because the data was very clearly showing that she was regressing badly unless she was receiving, for her specifically, the Orton-Gillingham method. And so data is just such a valuable part of the conversation.
It is. That's what I believe in. And actually this program was created for two groups of people in particular. One was dyslexia and the other was 2E, because they were getting not recognized as having a disability because they were doing okay. They were
Right.
doing good enough. And we said, if you look at these subtests, we'll see something different. So let me show you. There we go. You should see my website. I made it really, really simple because I'm really getting forgetful. So it's iephelp.com. I couldn't think of anything. I can remember it. So if you were to own this program, and you would just click over here and key in and log in, and you see how fast the screens go. That's how fast the system works, and that's what I'm going to show you. On the left side are individual student records, a variety of them. And if you were an advocate, you would have a ton of these. If you're a parent, you might just have one or two. But this is how easy it goes. Now, by the way, the manual is up here. And it's mostly pictures. And the reason it's mostly pictures is oftentimes children have dyslexia, parents do as well. And that was pointed out in our beta group. I got wonderful input. And so he said, okay, we'll make them as much picture based as we possibly can, which helps everybody. So just want to let you know it's there. Okay, we're going to look at how does this program work and what does it do? You'll find over here, date of birth, the disability. If you are keying in data, you don't have to memorize any of this. You just need to know that here's the section where you give information. And if you're new to special education, or you're not into the world of special education, know that you don't have to put a disability if you don't know what it is, and know that you can change it if it changes. And so we have primary disabilities, pick one, and secondary as well. You fill that out and we move on. We did not put in dyslexia or dyscalculia or any of the others because they fall, the federal government only has 13 handicapping conditions. And so we stuck to those thinking, well, if districts wanted to use this, this is what they would use. Anyway, it's editable. So you pick a test, and this is where we start. And I've already selected the WISC. I'm sure most are familiar. And we get this screen. Here are all those tests and subtests that you may not know about. You have the report. What we hated were to see reports, even on the WISC and other tests, producer of these tests would provide scale scores, percentile scores, standard scores, T-scores, Z-scores, all in the same whisk test. Totally confusing everybody. There's no, how do you compare a scaled and a standard? I don't even know what they are. So what we said is we're going to convert them all to standard scores. These standard scores are the ones that go down the bell curve. There's 1 point difference between 100, 99, 98, 97, 100, 101, 102. Scale scores are different, but the number 10 is the same thing as a standard score. So that's dead center of the bell curve. I don't have to compare these. I know what they are. 5th percentile is also dead center, but it converts it, or you can just put in 100. People used to do this with paper. They tried Excel, but it was so cumbersome that they would spend hours on doing this for every single child. We've automated it. So now we've got something that will transition them to standard scores automatically. The only trick is to put the right number in the right column, and we can understand better the bell curve. And that'll make more sense in a little bit. The other value of this, the way it's set up, is it has every cluster name and then the subtests under it. And as Tina was saying, psychologists don't administer all the subtests, but you don't know that. In this system, you'll know what's missing. And my book and collaboration is, I was looking through this and I say you didn't use this test or this one. Can you tell me why? Well, that's not challenging, but it's going to give you a host of information. And it's a way of asking that I know at those meetings, I know what they're like. I've sat in on literally thousands of them and I watch the blank stares. You know, I don't know what they're talking about. They use fancy words and numbers. So here's your chance to say, I don't know what visual spatial means. Can you tell me? And can you tell me how that affects any kids learning? And can you tell me how it's affecting my child's learning? Those are fair questions to ask, but you wouldn't know that they were missing unless you had this program to say, oh, because they don't list all the tests they don't list. They list just the ones they have. Did I say that? So that made sense, Tina, or did I go in a circle?
It did. One of the things that I recommend to parents is that when they are going through the process, and if they do know which tests the school is offering to do for their student for the evaluation, that one of the things that they do is they go to the test publisher's website to kind of get an overview of what that test is. An alternate would be to get Pete Wright's test book that lists all the different tests. I mean, that's not specific to dyslexia. That's literally a book with every test that at the time of printing, they know that schools are using. And of course, there are tests coming on all the time. A lot of Georgia schools have switched over to using NWEA's MAPS testing, and then they're passing that along to parents as evidence or not of progress monitoring. And so one of the things, Vaughn, that I would love for you to talk about is whether a test is norm referenced.
Yeah, that's what you just hit. I want to tell people, don't go buy this. It's got hundreds of tests in it, but it's useless. It just is a list of, you're better off going.
That's too much information. That's
that you can't use.
Yeah.
Our system only uses standardized evaluations. And the reason is because if you get 7 right, it's always going to be whatever it is. When you look at the state tests or any of the ones that are used, I don't want to say that. What was it? What did you just said the word?
The
Norm
norming.
referenced.
Yeah, norm
What
referenced.
Yeah, what the states have done, and so have the publishers, is decided where the cut score is. They adjust it. So it's not standardized. You can't adjust an IQ score to say, well, and the reason is what happened was back in the early 2000s when No Child Left Behind first came into play, states said, okay, we want the highest. These are the things every kid has to learn at this level, and they really made them high, and they tested the kids, and very few reached those standards, and they went, oops, and they immediately the next year lowered and lowered again. So that's why I don't hold a lot of faith in those tests. I'd rather see the child's classroom work, because that's a work sample I can look at. And these are all standardized and not subject to somebody changing where's the okay level, where's the not okay level. Did I cover that?
Yep.
Well, you can say behind my back, he didn't cover it. But if I want to add another test, I click add another test. I can either type in or the name of one, or I can scroll down. There are over 70 tests commonly used across the country. It doesn't have every one of them in there, but let's see if TAPS is in here. Yes, there it is. 2 versions. And I do that, this.
TAPS is not one that's used a lot around here.
It may not be, it's just an example.
Yeah.
And you see again, the TAPS will report out in scaled percentile and standard. On this side are, whoops.
Tori,
Are the-
Walton County uses it. That's interesting.
Yes, they used it. My daughter has central auditory processing disorder. And so they were using it to try to say she doesn't.
Oh,
So yeah.
How did that work out?
And oddly enough, but I don't recognize some of the things that you're showing on there. So I wonder if they even gave the complete test. So
Well, that's the full list of the TAPS 4. The TAPS 3 is slightly different. That's an earlier version. I don't know. But it does show you what's in here. It doesn't explain it. The dictionary for this test would be this thick, because what one test publisher calls phonological deletion is different than what another one calls. So we don't do that either. And this will make more sense in just a minute. But I just wanted to show you how easy it is. And it's the same idea. I'll put a scale score at 8, and 90 is 10 points lower below average. And I don't know what an 8, I don't know how to compare an 8 to a 10 or a 10 to 11 in scaled scores, but I can do 90 to 95 and know there's a 5-point difference, and that makes sense to me. Anyway, that's how we set it up. Easy to find tests, type them in or scroll through, add them in. Be accurate, that's really important. And I'm going to exit this one. And I'm going to go to one that was completed. Here we go. And now I'm going to start to show you what you get out of this that makes it easier to work with than trying to read all that paperwork. The program will not say you have a disability. That's still a team decision, but it's going to give you information where you ask more questions and say, looks to me like, and that was its intent. You can see the words copy and compare. This program will allow you to compare tests 3 years ago and this year if they're the same version, and they'll chart them for you. Copy, means I want to copy this particular test, and you don't have to keep them into your new record by hand. You just copy the old one in there and it's done. So there are some easy things. So I've got 5 tests in here. I've completed them. I want to see the results. This is the first graph that you get from having keyed in all those test results. Over here, we were asked by the group to give us an idea of where standard score ranges might be, and then put descriptors as well. So we get an idea. But there's a caveat here, and that's that some publishers say, here is average starts here, low average is here, here's the average range, and it's slightly different. So you have to know the test to know if there's a point or 2 difference. And that's why the caveat here. But what we've done is said, okay, 120 to 29 is a very high score. 30 and above, extremely high. We just gave words that were commonly used across the country and said, let's put them in here. But if you look at average here, between high average and low average, that's a span of 30 points. Well, it's even more the way it is here. And what schools will do, and I know some of you are going to go, yep, I heard that one, is she's in the average range. That doesn't tell you anything. Usually when they say the average range, the child is somewhere down here, and they don't want to say one more point and they're below average, so they say average range. When they're confident, they'll say, oh, it's got a high Q of 110 or 119 or dead center 100 for average. So descriptors are useless. And so when somebody says, well, he's in the average range, you please say, tell me what the test score was. I want to know what that word means. You write it down. You go, oh, yeah, okay. All right, on the left side, all the tests. And this is, for me, the biggest value of the charts is to look at here, down to here. And I see that there is a huge range of scores. When I see that, that's my first clue. Something's wrong here. Most people don't have that grand of a range of scores. They're much tighter. So I'm thinking there's something going on here. Without even looking at what is going on, I'm already aware of this range. And I'm going, huh. Let me look at the next test. 105 to 80. Good.
Vaughn, can it show it as percentiles?
In the next graph,
Okay.
more helpful. And the problem with percentiles, they don't actually measure skills. They measure where the child, let me do it this way. Andy's score gets numbers 1 to 10 is what's being studied. Andy gets 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Melissa gets 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. They get the same percentile, but they don't know the same thing.
Right.
That's the problem with percentile. That's my quick example of don't hold much to percentiles. And it's a little worrisome when you see that if your child's in the 16th percentile, means he does better than 16% of all the other kids, that's still the average range. And you go, what? That doesn't make any sense. But when you see it on a bell curve, it does start to make sense. And that's not what we're talking about tonight. Good questions. Then we look at the CTOP, and once again, a range of scores. And the Kaufman, I already know they didn't give the full Kaufman, but I've got 84 to 76. Well, they're kind of tight. But when I get to the Wyatt, which is also an achievement test, I'm 115 down to 74. I'm sure everybody in the audience is going, there's something up here.
Right.
This is just full of problems. And you're right. Here's the problem with the charts. If I'm looking at total reading, let's say here, then I want to go up to here to look at reading. And then I want to go up to here. And did they do reading? No, I can't do it's cumbersome to go back and forth. So the best this can do is tell you there's a range of score here, here, and here across a number of tests. And you will know that this is problematic. There's something going on. I haven't defined it yet, but I soon will. What I also tell, not that you need to remember this, is I tell people to key in the cognitive test first, the IQ test, because it's all these, what you said earlier, Tina, it's the subtests that are more informative. The full scale IQ, I know districts will go and say, well, she has 100 IQ and she's doing C's, so what do you want? Well, I want you to pay attention to all these other high skills and a lot more. I'll bet you've heard that too. Anyway, you do the cognition first, and then you do the tests of process like written expression or the GORT that measures reading fluency and yeah, enough said there. And the CTOP that looks at the phonemes, and these are all processes that most people don't understand. That's my point. We're not trained in this. Teachers aren't trained in advanced testing, but they do know this part. They know reading and math and word recognition. Those are terms they know, and we save them for the end. And again, I'll show you why. So far, this is easy. The program's doing the work for you. You're just looking at it going, huh, wonder what this means. Next, I go to the last graph and I get this. And again, it's this fast. Here is the bell curve that I was talking about, with 100 being average. And she just happens, I didn't make this up, this is a real case. She happens to have an average IQ. And you know what the school told mom? We can probably recite this together. She's average, she's got C's, what do you want? Well, you already knew that a lot of things here were well below average, and they're probably bringing down her IQ and impacting, and we're going to look at what those things are. So what I'm going to do, I can hide a whole test. You watch these disappear and you watch the colors of black disappear. I can bring this down to look at one test or 5 tests or all. This means nothing. It's way too confusing. I don't know how to use it. And this is what we do. We hide the tests. We'll bring them back. And now all I have showing, all I better have showing, is the whisk. And I have scores down here.
So she's all over the place.
Thank you. That's the message. And that's what those charts were saying. But now I'm seeing, all right, I'm going to compare it to her IQ that you guys are. And I'm already seeing there are a whole bunch of scores down here that are below average. No matter what they tell you, it's below average. You'll also see over here, if they didn't administer a test, it'll be blank. And there's your chance to ask, why didn't you, politely, I just want to know, why didn't you assess her in these areas? They could say, because we evaluated arithmetic in the Wyatt and the other test, and so we didn't want to do 2. Okay, but at least you know what wasn't tested.
Could I ask one of the questions that got asked?
Yeah, please.
It's a hypothetical situation that happens every day. A child gets a diagnosis of dyslexia by way of a private evaluation or a school evaluation, but the school denies a 504 or IEP because they're not failing. based on a variety of measurements that they have, such as MAP scores, even though K2 have oral questions on headphones, so not a great measure of reading in any way, or their classwork or grades. We have countless stories where our children find ways to overcome in the early grades. It doesn't mean they don't need intervention and services as soon as possible to prepare them for reading to learn. Do these test results qualify as evidence of failure or failing behind in Georgia, or will MAP and grades win out?
These tests that we're looking at tonight will explain what processes and cognitive weaknesses the child has that are impacting one, for this, her IQ. And as we go along, we're going to see how the rest of the tests fall, and you start to see, what could be a relation between, and let me do that here.
Okay.
I know what the schools are doing. They're taking the state standards and saying, hey, this is a good enough, because that's all it's become. States have lowered those standards, so, or you get to take them over again and over again, but they passed. Yeah, my daughter had to take this 3 times to pass, but she passed, so we're moving on. And it's crazy what's happening. So what this is going to end up doing is showing you what is the problem. She has a reading problem, but you're going to understand why she has a reading problem. And that's what the team is supposed to know. So mom was showing this. She called me up. So I got to tell you how the meeting went, and I'll explain that in a little bit. So let's just look at these test scores. Picture span is working memory and processing speed. Coding is the same thing. And digit span is processing speed. So I'm just going to focus on these 3, and I'm going to say, okay, I've got some idea that the reason she needs extra time is because she's not processing things quickly, or in her memory, working memory, it takes a bit longer. Put those 2 together and you need extra time. Well, that's all she was getting on a 504 plan. And mom says there's more to this than what you guys are saying. Oh, I'm going to give the GORT, which I love. And oh, let me see what the GORT says are the areas of need. Rate, which is speed and working memory. Catching on, I know you are. Fluency, how fast can she read if she's stumbling over, remembering which sounds, putting them together. And there's not going to be accuracy in a short, given amount of time. If you've got these things that are in your way, they're going to impact how accurately you are reading. Well, that's now 2 tests that are essentially saying there's working memory and processing speed problems here, even though if we go up to the IQ test, the processing speed is in the average range, but that's assuming that her 100 IQ is really her IQ. What they didn't do is account for her processing speed and working memory, that her real IQ, or could be IQ, might be 110, but they didn't apply the general ability index, which is a statistical way of accounting for working memory and processing speed.
Is that common for, I know that some people who do independent educational evaluations for parents who have earned them through their parental rights, that this locally there are school psychologists, private psychologists who will do the GAI.
Mhm.
Is that common for a school to actually put that in and run that number?
I'm sorry, I'm gonna say it depends.
Okay,
There has to be a statistical flag that says
okay,
these two things might be impacting the IQ. You better give the GAI. Some schools will just not give it and not tell the parent. And that's where I go to my psychologist and I say, look at this test. And he'll look up the book and say, yeah, these two, working memories and processing speed, caused us to give the GAI, or the district should have instituted done the evaluation through the general ability index. And what I like about that, it says, look, we're looking at all the scores, but if we account for these two and put them over here, what would her IQ be? And it's usually higher, sometimes significantly higher.
I have a
But,
quick question that I'm gonna ask
well, let me just
Ken.
say, this
Oh, sure,
form will show a blank and you can ask, why did you not give the GAI? And you never would have known otherwise. Thank
right.
you. Great
So,
question.
Ken said that the school psychologist. Now, Ken, remind me where you are located. I think you're south of here.
Yes, I'm in Macon, the Bibb County School District.
Okay, so Bibb County, and which is 2 hours south of us, Vaughn, here in Atlanta. And he said that he took his child after that to Children's Hospital for a neuropsych evaluation. But Ken, my question to you is, does your child have a secondary reason for going to CHOA and getting a neuropsych evaluation, another medical condition? Because someone recently said, oh no, you have to have XYZ to get a neuropsych evaluation done by CHOA.
Yeah, he was seen at CHOA Scottish Rite because he was born with some birth defects.
Okay.
So that may be how we got in there, but yeah, our school psychologist ran some tests and he pretty much said that our son had anxiety and possible depression, but it was only through CHOA that we got the correct diagnosis of dyslexia, and then that really made everything made sense. And I need to go back to our school evaluation and plug in these numbers because yeah, I didn't understand the information that was being shown, and now I'm wondering, I want to plug that in and chart it, because now I'm wondering, if some of these subtests were done or what tests were conducted.
It's interesting that you mentioned that lack of attention to detail. Let's just call it what it is, from the school psychologist. But one of the things that I actually had a private psychologist do is, or neuropsychologist do, is pull the test scores from my son's 3rd grade Cobb County school evaluation and plug them into her. It was the Woodcock Johnson. She just dragged his scores over from the Cobb report and stuck them in her own private report 2 years later. And I was like, why didn't you test him on this? And she said, oh, well, the data's here. I'm like, okay, this is just bad news. If we've got private evaluators not doing the right thing, I know the schools is under a lot of pressure, but paying for this is a mess. So Vaughn, let's just say we've got a lot of creative psychology going on around here.
I'm going to write that down.
I don't know what the professional standards are. And Caroline Bowman, who's on here, is professionally a speech language pathologist. And I love speech language pathologists because they really do a good job of understanding the language component of the reading deficits. So
You have no argument from me there. They are
Yeah.
my favorite group for personal reasons, and they understand language, which that's what we're talking about here, how to process words, sounds. And I get disturbed when the school psychologist does the speech and language testing. I'm going, wrong person. Where is the SLP in this? Because he or she would have something else to say, I'm sure. Let me bring you back here and say that I'm not trying to train anybody to be a psychologist. This program won't do the work for you, but it provides enough information for you to ask questions. And like I said, on any of these, let's say rate, you ask, what happens if any child has problems with rate, whatever that means, define it for me. How is it impacting my child? Because that's the connection you always want to make it in the conversation. It's going to take longer to go through this, but you're going to have a lot more information and a better understanding. And so are the members of that team that might likely have been told not to say a word because the school psychologist, oh, you've experienced that too.
oh yeah. Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
no, I know we do. And so
And I've experienced that. I've gone to a few IEP meetings for friends' children and experienced much the same, where it was clear that some of the things some people were saying or thinking one thing, and then all of a sudden, then they turn around, like the person at the head of the table says something different, and you can see them, they're spinning their wheels to backtrack on the comments they made. And I'm literally taking notes of what these people are saying in the meeting, and then they refute themselves in the end.
and yes, yeah, don't take away everything I've got to say. But if you just look at these two tests, we've got not one test, but two tests that are saying very much the same thing. Now imagine showing this to, well, a parent or the IEP team, and they're going, well, I've never seen it this way before. All right, so we're going to do the CTOP, which is phonological processing, the more heavy duty, but they skip some areas, as you can see down here. And again, we ask why, but let me pop them on here. Orange is a little hard to see, but let's
Right.
see what's down here. And those who are already ahead of me are guessing non-word repetition,
Mhm.
working memory, at a minimum, rapid, I can stop. Speed memory, working memory, processing speed, and rapid simple stop. I hit working memory and processing speed for the third time. Might I point out to the IEP team that this is the third test I saw that seemed to be saying the same thing.
And then there's one way over 2 standard deviations below.
Yeah, I hate that. I don't know where that came from. There is no statistical reason for that's extreme. So this format puts that over to the side and says, no, we're going to look at the actual test scores and how those impact on learning for all kids and my kid. And it might not be 2 standard deviations, which would be down here, 80. I could ignore all these. That's not how we're going to do it. I really hate states that have done that, because where does it come from? Where's their justification? The purpose that they have that is fewer kids get identified. But
Right.
when you look at all these data, the last thing a school psychologist goes, well, they're not 20 points. Whoa. They're 15, they're 18, they're 20. Here's one down here. It's 30. Don't tell me that. It makes it really hard for them to justify the 20 point. And we'll go to the last. See, there are a lot of test scores not administered here, but we're only concerned right now in this area. I wonder what's going to happen when we look at this achievement test. We sure did get a lot of blue things down here. Anybody want to guess what's in here? Oh, math fluency, the ability to do it quickly. Here we go again. Here's where all those things that are cognitive or processing say, pay attention, there's an area of need here. 3 tests saying the same thing. Here's where it's showing up in reading, oral reading accuracy, math fluency twice. It's the big area. Total reading. Okay, I'm done. And this is how mom did this. And I want you to appreciate, you will appreciate it. I spent very little time with her except to say, these are the questions to ask. Present it this way. I printed out some information for her, but it was all the same. And she was not a statistician. She was just a mom who understood the concepts. She started showing the data to the team, and she knew the team was told not to speak. And the psychologist said, where'd you get those test scores? Of all the questions to ask, she said, I almost burst out laughing. I said, from your report. I said, can I see your laptop? Yes. And he looked at it and he looked at it. Oh, okay. And he gave it back. The demeanor of the team meeting changed totally to focus on the child, not mom's needs or their needs, but the child's. That was funny enough. She also, as she was going through here saying, well, you know, there's problems with reading. Did you not tell me that it took her extra time to read things? And then the teacher said, yeah, I did. This is interesting. Yeah, I did. And she'd go to the next one, the science teacher, who also, whatever it was. But she was going around the room getting input from everybody. And I said to her, you know, when you go to this meetings, you may get a PE teacher sitting in as a general ed teacher. It isn't what the law had ever intended, but it meets the letter of the law, not the intent. She said, and there was a PE teacher there. So she goes to the PE teacher and says, what do you think? And he said, you know, I don't teach reading, but with what you've presented here, it clearly looks like she has a reading problem because of memory and processing speed. She got everybody in agreement. She did not get everything. And by just asking questions, did you not see that here? Did you see this here? How does this affect all kids? How is it affecting my daughter? And made it, that's that collaboration I was telling you about by involving everybody. She said, I didn't get everything that I wanted, but she said, what I got was what my daughter needed. And the issue of having extra time came up, and mom said, could you do me one favor? Could you, like prepped her for this one, could you teach her what to do with that extra time? Because she doesn't know. She's still stumbling through the processing and working memory. And because the teachers understood why she didn't complete things quickly, they said, yeah, that would make a lot of sense. So they were going to teach her daughter what to do. What it was, I can't tell you. But that's how the meeting went, simply by her asking questions.
One of the things that Dina's asking is, what did this mom ask for and what did she get? You know, I think that what we find here in Georgia is that our school districts are providing such a wide variety of specialized services and supports under the IEP that there's just, like, what I experienced for my son was that they weren't willing to put anything specific into the IEP, and that it was a kitchen sink approach.
Yeah.
And I think that there are some places not in service-starved Georgia that actually will provide those specialized services to students. So what did this mom wind up getting for her child?
I love these questions. Mom only had a 504 plan, and she had been pushing for an IEP. And so the 504 plan was just extra time. What she got was services for reading, services for math. I can't remember if writing was one of those. I just can't remember. So she got those two big ones that she wasn't getting before. That's all I can remember. And we're going back a couple of years. But she went from the 504, which is in itself an accomplishment, to an IEP. And because of these, what it kept showing down here, she was able to get those services.
Do you know if they specified a methodology for this mom, or whether it was just, okay, well, teacher's going to do XYZ, here are the goals?
Yeah, that methodology is one of the things that isn't required in the federal government. I can't tell you the details here. You know, it's what was used. I don't know. And
Okay.
if I don't know, it's because I don't remember, or I just never did. The function purpose of this particular one is to see she went from really nothing to where she was getting the team to go, yeah, let's look at the daughter's needs and let's provide a program to address them. These were very hard to refute. Even a school psychologist who was he had his invisible hammer there, he had to put it away. Now, it comes with practice doing something like this. And as I said, it's not for everybody, but it's not that difficult if you just go into it and say, I'm going to ask questions. What is this test? If it's low for any kid, what does that mean? Well, it's low here for my child. How is that affecting him or her learning right now? Can you tell me? And they should be able to explain that to you. It's questions psychologists are rarely asked. So you're going to stymie them by saying, now tell me how it's affecting my child, because that's what you really want to know. What you'll get in those reports, and you've all seen them, is word reading means the following. And it's kind of nebulous and yeah, okay, fine. You want to focus more on, okay, maybe that is a little vague, but how does it impact learning of reading for every kid? Or, oh, these aren't the ones. Or even listening comprehension. What does that mean for every kid? What does it mean for my child? Because that seems like a low score. And you go through the process of asking questions. It's amazing because it ends up feeding itself the IEP, because you can move from here to say, okay, now we're going to put goals of reading and goals of math and so forth. That's what this program does.
Now,
I'm excited because I've seen it work and have so many parents write back and say, oh, this is so cool.
Now, do you know if parents are able to get, I see the save as a PNG, are parents able to get the school to put the graphs in the IEP documentation?
You're asking me what, Tina?
This allows you to save the file as a PNG file for image capture.
Right.
Do you know of any of the people who use this being able to get the image put into their IEP?
Oh, in the IEP? No, but that's a good thought, because it's part of the documentation of what we know. The value is, all computers have the ability to take a screenshot or a section shot. Here you can print out the whole page, or you can save just this as a ping. I wouldn't save this. You can click on these and You can see how they overlap very quickly and it becomes useless. This was never intended to be a paper document,
Okay,
but the requests were, can we? And we did that. So
Yeah.
you can print this out, you can print the entire page out, or if you need, you can do a screen capture of anything you want. I like that idea because
So
it's information and you
it
can
is
say,
information.
I
So
want you to put this in the report.
all I want them to do is I would write my parental concerns letter and ask them to put it in, but I'd put dyslexia as pretty much every other word in my parental concerns. So that
I'm really surprised.
dyslexia was in the document because our principal, when we were from kindergarten to fourth grade, was a dyslexia denier. Lots of fun.
Yeah.
Um,
Another value in printing is, you see, when I go to the next test, I bring it right up here and I can look at it and I can hide all the others and just look at the court scores. But I like that idea of printing this out, and just for the records, I'd like this in my child's folder.
So Dina has a really good question. She said her child is 2E, and I have one of those as well, Dina. I love them. It says, let me scroll back. Is it possible for a child to receive support services in the gifted classes?
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, yes.
Yes, they should. I mean, districts should be able to accommodate students with 2E. They don't like to.
No, they don't. But the federal law says, even if you're passing from grade to grade, you can still qualify as having a disability. This, as I said, addresses 2E and children with dyslexia. Because you're looking, Dina, you should be looking at the same thing. Yeah, you got an IQ, you should be happy with what they're getting. But your point is, yeah, and all of these represent the disabilities that are going along with it. It's a good thing my child is very, very bright because he or she is compensating. However, these areas need to be addressed. I like these questions.
It's a small but mighty group.
Well, you know, that's how everything starts. One person has an idea, shares it with others. Let me add that, of course, I do have a business and we do consult, and we're very good at what we do. And we all have the same concept of we do collaboration until the school stops collaborating. And then we start to sound like Tina. But up until that point. But what I'm saying to you is, and I'm offering to help where I can. We have folks that can help you make sense out of an evaluation, if you would like, could help you put it into this SEDS program, Special Ed Decoder system, and could, if you wanted, help you list out the questions you want to ask at the meeting. And there's the value of getting the school report more than one day before the meeting. So that
Right.
you can do this. We're small, so we can't do 100 at a time, but we have those abilities and would welcome anybody to say, help me out here. Did I do this right? And I guess the other thing I would add is when you finish putting in the data, you won't remember all this because there's so much tonight. And you close it out and you go, I forgot a test. Just email me and say, could you open my record? You won't be the first and you won't be the last, and I'll be happy to do that. So this is you got it in a very fast format. And that now I'm wondering just thoughts that people have having seen this.
So Ken asks question.
He's only allowed one more.
Oh, okay.
I'm kidding, Ken.
Can this tool be used to see if someone is making progress in a certain area or receding? Can you show that? Can you be plugging in progress monitoring?
You know, this won't show anything but these tests. It won't show, there are other programs out there that allow you to show goal progress, if that's what you mean. Is that what you were asking, Ken?
I
feel like
guess
I
what I
know.
was asking is, so for instance, if you had the WISC test and you had it for, let's say, several years, are
Okay.
you able to compare the same test on that curve from several years? I guess we could print that out, print out just on that test on the curve and look at the individual on the chart, but I didn't know if there was a way to chart that.
There is.
Okay.
I'm glad you asked that question. And here's an example. I took the court because it's only got a very small number of tests in it. If it were the WISC with 20 some scores, it would be cumbersome. But remember, I said this had the ability to copy and compare. You can only compare the same version. And here's the GORT 5 and the GORT 5, different years. This one is done in 16. This was done in 2011. And I'm going to say, I want to compare two tests. This is in case you have, tests all over the place. I'm going to compare, okay, this one. And at the top, it says, okay, you've selected this. Pick another test to compare with, and I'll come back down here. And it's that fast. I still have the test scores on the left-hand side. They're still color-coded. And now I can look at the test scores across here. And what was it, 16 and 11? That's a 5-year difference.
So this kid's not knocking it out of the park with whatever it is that
Well,
they're doing.
They're making, let me explain it this way. The rate in 1 year was 80 and the rate next year 85. It's not a lot, but it's upward direction. Here, accuracy was 85 both times. Here, comprehension was 90 both times. These numbers represent a comparison to the population progress. And so they're learning, this might be backwards on your side, but they're learning at a rate like this. If the child's still 85 and getting 85, he also is making progress. He's still that gap between the 100 or average, but he's still in this direction. He is making progress. If not, the curve, the arrow went this way, we've got a problem.
Right.
And a lot of people don't understand that. In order to maintain this, he's maintained the same amount of growth over the same period of time that the average child has. He hasn't caught up. He hasn't done this yet, and he hasn't surpassed, but he's continued to make progress.
Okay.
And I know some folks, bigwigs, don't understand that.
One of the questions that came up is about test age. What are appropriate intervals for testing? I know the federal law says that it's 3 years. I live in a district that chose not to do an evaluation on my child when they should have, and I forced their hand. And then the second time, we were in the school district for 6.5 years. And the second time around, they didn't bother to test him at that second interval because the year before I had private testing done, which I think is not okay. But that's what I live with, what we live with around here. And then, so legally, you're allowed to, parents ask for the school district to test up to not more than once a year. So every year, calendar year, you can ask for updated testing. They
Is
may
that-
balk at it.
Is that a Georgia? That's a Georgia law.
It is.
Okay.
But, you know, the requirement is that the district is supposed to do an evaluation every 3 years.
Yes.
What,
And if they choose not to, that's with your agreement.
right.
So if you didn't agree, you had the right to have the schools like, no, you're going to test them. I want a full evaluation. And keep in mind that those triennials, the purpose is not to compare growth, but it's to say child still has a disability and needs special education services.
I think that sometimes parents are hesitant to have the district do the testing again because their child may not be found eligible again, but
Yeah.
still need services.
And if a parent is comfortable with, look, my kid still has a disability, we all recognize they have a disability, and that thing got put into place and approved because they used to have to do triennial for everybody. And why would you do that for a child who's blind? Why would you do that for a child who's spina bifida? You know, nothing has changed. Why would we go through that process? And then they expanded it out. But yeah, I'm sorry, I just had too many thoughts on that one. But the purpose of the triennial, I mean, it's nice that the state says you can test every year. I don't know what you would be using. You wouldn't be measuring the IQ test. That's not going to help you any. Your IQ isn't expected to change via learning. It's still the same. What tests were you asking
Like
for?
the GORT in particular, the CTOP, anything that would give normed data to support whether or not the interventions that the district is using are working. Because a lot of times the progress monitoring tools are not being done properly, or the wrong tools are being used. Especially if you've got districts like we have here using, for example, the benchmark assessment system by Faunus and Pinnell, which is as effective as flipping a coin. Vaughn, that product is everywhere down here.
How did it get in?
Faunus and Pinnell, Georgia is big Faunus and Pinnell country.
Our school only added it last year. Yay! Not.
Wow.
So
I mean, you saw
progressive,
I
Tori.
couldn't believe you said those words.
Yeah, no, the BAS is commonly used here. And then in the last 3 years, a lot of districts have been moving to the MAPS testing that's done by NWEA.
Yeah.
But lots of Faunus and Pinnell here, lots of leveled literacy intervention. And in fact, one of the dyslexia pilot applications said that they would be using LLI as an intervention in the dyslexia pilot, which is not cool because it's not an effective program.
When school districts have those programs, because I was in the school district, they insist that you use it. And because they paid all of that money, they
Mhm.
insist you cannot let those things sit on the shelf. You will be out of compliance.
So I'm in the middle of bedtime a little bit, but I dropped in the chat. Hi, I'm Megan. I helped Tina some with decoding dyslexia things. I dropped in the chat 2 passages from IDEA that really have helped me personally and other parents in Georgia combat when they want to put LLI in your IEP as their intervention. One is the essential components of reading instruction as defined by the IDEA, and another is the definition of science-based approach as defined by the IDEA. neither of which Fontes and Pinnell or LLI meet the requirements of. So if you put all this in writing in an email, which is important because it needs to be a parental concern, which is an actual, Tina, what would you call it? A legal definition? It's like it is something they will have to consider and respond to you in writing. And if they don't, then that is also another complaint that you could file because they didn't respond to you. They are legally required to respond to a parental concern. So put it in writing in an email, attach the language from the IDEA saying Fontes and Pinnell leveled literacy intervention does not meet these requirements as required by federal government IDEA, and see what they say, because, you know, it doesn't, it's not science-based. They do not, they've never had their programs in a peer-reviewed journal, which is part of the definition of science-based. Their only studies that show they're effective are paid for by themselves. They're not peer-reviewed. And so anyways, just some of the language from the IDEA and could help parents in this effort to get actual evidence-based methodologies in your IEP. That's it. I'm going back to bedtime. So.
Well, I want to say those are really good points. And the other thing to add to that is they put on their website 4 or 5 years ago that their programs were not for dyslexic children. I had that copied someplace. So it should
still, I think somewhere on their blog they have addressed that. We should link to that too, Tina.
Yeah, because that negates using them for kids with dyslexia. And I want to go back to the 2 tests that you used, Tina. Those are great tests for showing growth. The GORT will do that, and so will the CTOP.
Right.
Good choices.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I'm sorry, I'm Angie. I was just, I just went through my first eligibility meeting for my child on Monday. And so, and it is very interesting to hear all of this because they really congratulated themselves a lot about how much progress they had made with my child, because he came in reading on an F&P of level like CD, and now he's made it all the way to a J. However, he's reading at his fluency rate is like 17 words a minute. And, you know, if you're familiar with what that rate should be, the average, it should be 65 words in a minute. And so, or for the allotted time. I'm not certain if it's a minute. This is a whole new world for me. I'm a medical professional, not this, but anyway, so thankfully we did get through it, and our school psychologist, who was really terrible at our SST meeting, really backed it up, because she did all of the Wechsler test and found such huge ranges and stuff, and then she said some really rude things like during our original meeting. Was like, I don't think we should test this kid at all, but because I was just adamant, and I was not taking no for an answer. She really ended up being my huge advocate during that meeting and saying, you know, look, we see these huge ranges on this kid. You know, he has this, you know, really high cognitive ability, but yet he's, you know, still had huge, like, phonemic awareness, but, you know, he still has a fluency rate of like 17 to 20. And so anyway, but they just were so impressed with themselves of him, you know, making that progress. And I'm like, well, it's because if the progress that he may have made is because he's also seeing an OG tutor privately. But anyway, It's just like, this is such a horrible measurement. And I just really, even in like the beginning, I can see this, and like having no knowledge base really. But anyway, just
Angie, where are you based?
I'm in Gwinnett County.
Okay.
And thankfully I was very gifted with the Missy Purcell.
Okay.
And so I lamented to the right person in my neighborhood, and they're like, oh, you know who you should call is Missy. And she has held my hand and gotten us through this process so fast. I mean, compared to what so many families go through. I mean, obviously we've been going through it since September, October of this year, but I mean, we've had our eligibility. We're waiting to, I guess the part I'm at now is trying to figure out like what are appropriate interventions, accommodations. And so that's where I feel like I need a ton of guidance at this point. So.
Well,
And
I think,
Monica, where are you based?
I'm in Gwinnett County. I used to work for Gwinnett County school system for 10
Okay.
years up until 2016. And I know exactly what you're saying. I used to be an administrator, not in Gwinnett, but I was the person that sat in on the special ed meetings. And, you know, so when you say what you say, I know that you're talking what you're talking about. And even once you do get things put in place, the key to it is that they actually do it.
Right.
You can say, hooray, we talked about it, it's in the IEP, but the follow through is a whole nother story. It's on paper. That's
Right.
it. And then you don't always have skilled people that know how to implement it.
Yeah.
So it's just like doctors. They might be certified, but that doesn't mean they have the same skill set. That's why people go to specialists in other places. And you wonder, well, wasn't it enough in your state? Well, apparently they didn't specialize and they weren't necessarily up on their craft the same way, but we're certified. That does not mean we're equal in ability, skill set, and knowledge base. So you have to advocate, but also know what you're advocating for. And this is so informative, and I'm glad, because a lot of parents don't know what to ask, don't have a clue.
Yeah.
and I want to share something too. That I love your story. It's true. I know you've been in IEPs by the words you said, but we're working with two attorneys, two different sets of attorneys who are looking at this to take to the due process, because they feel it can show the hearing officers, and they don't know stats either. And you don't have to recognize there's a problem, but I'm excited because it means that another level of people are looking at this and saying, well, I understand this. I can make the hearing officer understand. I got it made. And so even if you already had an evaluation and you've gone through that process and you weren't happy with it, you can still key these data in, look at it and say, hey, there's enough here to go back. I want to have another discussion. And again, the people I work with are nicer than me. We'll be happy to help you on any level. And I gave it to you very quickly tonight. I love your questions. I'm going to take this group with me.
I'm telling you, Vaughn, we've got some of the best parents down here in Georgia, and we have some of the best students with dyslexia who come to the Capitol every year, and they rock my world. They're the reason why I'm passionate about this and trying to convey to state leaders that this is a population of students who really deserve and need more from what they're getting, because their life trajectories could change so beautifully if they were just given the right supports and services. Tori, I see your question. Vaughn's up in Virginia, and Monica has a question.
I was just clapping.
Oh, that's a clap. Okay, I see now. So I see that it is almost, well, it's 8:22. Does anybody else have any questions? You can reach Vaughn by way of iephelp.com. And of course, if any of you have questions of me, I am more than happy to, if you just ping me at the Decoding Dyslexia Georgia Facebook page, I try and be responsive to that. And happy to answer any questions or provide to you any information that I could possibly offer.
And if you want, it's Vaughn at IEPhelp.com. makes stuff simple. If you're interested in more in the program, just go here and you can try it out, test it out if you'd like, or you can buy a report.
Vaughn, are you a psychologist, a lawyer? How,
Oh,
besides your
heavens,
wife
no,
being in
I'm not a
special ed,
lawyer.
besides you being, or your wife being in special ed, how did you get involved in this?
Um,
Are you a
But
teacher?
yeah, I've been a teacher, a building administrator, a district office administrator, state administrator in special education, and an author when I got out of public school. It's interesting. Once you're in it, you never leave it. I told my wife I was going to do something else. She said, "Yeah, what would you do? I know you'd be up there answering people's questions." Well, you're there. So that gives me all kinds of experiences. I helped California develop their alternate performance assessment back in the early 2000s when educational testing services needed somebody who knew, who had been a real person in the field to work with them, to work with California. And it's a mix of things. I'll throw one more thing out, because you never know where things will land. A couple of weeks ago, I did a virtual presentation in Malaysia. And I'll talk to anybody, if you listen. So
I had one other question. The reason why I didn't recognize the TAPS test listing is because my daughter was given TAPS 3, not TAPS 4. At
okay.
what point do you consider, like, I've forced the district, I know for my youngest daughter, she was given Goldman Fristow as speech evaluation, and it was an old test, and I forced them to do the newer test.
Good for you.
I'm
trying to
didn't realize. Sorry, I was gonna say I didn't realize there were 2 TAPs. So
yeah, that saves them a buck. The other thing is that I can't remember. Most publishers give folks 2 years to transition to the new one because they've got to retrain everybody across the country. So you might get you might not get the new test, but you can insist on it. But you definitely want a person who's been trained on it to administer it.
Here's the interesting thing. TAPS 4 came out in 2018. So my daughter was tested in 2020.
Okay, no excuse
So,
for that.
Yeah.
Right. No
You
excuse.
have a right to complain.
Now I have more documentation for a due process. That's what I'm working on. So I was like, ooh, that was interesting. I didn't catch that being an older test.
Wow,
So,
that's just ridiculous.
right.
I mean, that's how it rolls around here. There's not a lot of oversight from the state. We're local control, so the state is Department of Education is very hands off with the districts here, and it's left to parents to really enforce IDEA, which is an extraordinary burden given that we're already raising children who have disabilities.
Yeah,
I just have one quick question. Can you so going into the next part of our process is going to be writing goals and interventions and accommodations and stuff. I guess, is there how do we learn about, as parents, without this training, what are the appropriate goals for my particular child? Is there like a book? I mean, does the book that you showed at the beginning of the meeting, does that go into there? That's where I feel really, really clueless. I mean, so as to how do I learn about what I need to, what services my kid needs, what, just what are appropriate goals and accommodations and stuff. What should they be doing for my child so that I can make sure that they're doing the right things? So what direction would I look for that? So
let me this book will help you
Okay.
lead a collaborative IEP meeting. It shows you how you build an IEP from
Okay.
the base up. But
Okay. I've ordered it, by the way.
oh, thank you. Well, I get like 50 cents a book.
Oh, yay.
I'm living in the lap of luxury.
Yeah.
What you do is, and what these tests will do, will help define the first question: what do we know about my child?
Right.
When you get agreement by the team, then you build goals based on not only this, but the classroom work samples, not only that, but teacher observations, not only that, but parental observations. You put all that together and say, okay, we agree, here are the needs. Let's write a goal in a way that's measurable, behavioral, that is easy to measure, because every marking period, you're going to get a progress report. And that progress report better not say making progress. It better be very specific to, if it's my child recognizes the first 3 letters of the alphabet, the goal is all of the letters of the alphabet. That progress report should say child is now 7 letters of the alphabet, not making progress. That's the process, but you've got to start with everybody agreeing what the needs are, and then one goal for each need. Tina, I just jumped in because it's.
Yeah. No, I also sent her a direct message. One of the books that I really like is by Kelly Sandman Hurley. It's called
Okay.
Dyslexia Advocate. And one
Okay.
of the things that's in that book is she does a very good job of writing out goals specific to the needs within the deficit areas that students with dyslexia often have. And what she also does is she writes them in a way that really shows. Kelly Sandman Hurley from Dyslexia Training Institute. And she does a really good job of writing them in a way that if you compare them to what a typical school will put in an IEP, that is, they're not measurable, they're not SMART goals. And in fact, if you get a copy of that book, it will blow your mind as to what sorts of things you could be advocating for in the IEP, because she does such a good job. And it's a slim little book, but she does such a good job of explaining the elements that need to go into educating a child who has dyslexia.
And if you read her first book, you'll find that I wrote a very long piece in there with my recommendations of how good she is to work with. And I just saw she posted, read this book. So
Okay.
yeah, I support Kelly's work.
Yeah. And a book that just came out called The Adult Side of Dyslexia is really, really good. Really good, because she does interviews with a lot of adults who have dyslexia, and they're reflecting on what they experienced in school. So it's kind of a nice roadmap for people who are working with students to understand some of what causes the difficulties that students with dyslexia have as they start to get older and become the young adults and adults in our world. Because as we know, dyslexia you don't outgrow it.
Right.
Well,
Thank you. Those
for
are
letting
very,
me
very
be here.
helpful. And I've written those down. Yeah.
Great. Well, y'all, it's time for me to take off my shoes and, I don't know, go kiss my dog.
She already has her shoes off. Don't let her.
No, I've got my shoes on.
Oh, okay. Show off. I just want to thank everybody. And if I can help in some way, just reach out.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you,
Thank
folks.
you.
Thank
Y'all
Thanks,
have a
everyone.
great
Good
evening.
night.
Thank you.
Good night.
And Tina, I will get you the video.
Okay, awesome.